All right, so let's get to our session today and welcome you to Maeva Gauthier's presentation this morning. Maeva, thank you very much for being with us. I would like to run through some of the organizational stuff, but you're all pros by now. So while we have Maeva's presentation, or sorry, before that, the most important thing, acknowledge that we, with respect to the Lekwungen peoples, on whose traditional territory the University of Victoria stands, and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and the Saanich peoples, whose relationship with the land continues to this day. And we will hear from Maeva also in a second how this strong connection to the land also shapes issues of how communities govern themselves, their perception of the threats to the community. Here as well, Indigenous traditions play a critical role. So maybe I think we'll introduce us to some of this in a second, but we should also acknowledge that the University of Victoria stands on the of the traditional territory of the Songhees people. So a couple of housekeeping items. You see here while Maeva is talking, please switch off your camera, mute your mic. And then once Maeva is done, you have the ability to either let us know that you have a question through the chat function, or you raise your hand. That's another function in the Zoom platform. So let us know. It would be nice if you then could unmute your mic and come on with the camera, so it gives us somewhat more of a feeling of community that is a bit difficult to replicate in the online format. So on the next slide here, you see where to find these things, but I think by now we are all almost painfully familiar with Zoom, I suppose. So probably not much training needed here for you guys. So also the heads up, you might have seen, the notification that this meeting is being recorded. So it will be made available, if Maeva agrees, we can talk about this later. On our website. It gives us a nice archive of the presentations we had on top and make them available also to other audiences. So you might want to keep this in mind when you raise your questions as well. So today's presentation. So Maeva comes from us originally from Quebec, and where she completed the degree actually in was biology, right? BSc in biology. And then, she came to UVic 13 years ago, maybe I think you told us now. You've been on the West Coast by now to do a degree in marine ecology. And at the moment, Maeva is a PhD student in geography, and she's also affiliated with a community-based research lab, that many of us have heard about already, and definitely an important feature of Maeva's life is being a fellow at the center. So wonderful that you could still do this. You became a fellow a year and a half ago or so, but it's wonderful that you can still join us and participate and keep on being a fellow at the center for this year. Her research focuses primarily on Tuktoyaktuk in the Arctic, and Maeva's central interest here is to understand how community perceives threats, particularly with respect to the environment, climate change, plastics in the oceans, and from an on-the-ground perspective, trying to understand, how these communities engage and take on these huge questions that shapes their lives. And for this, she looks at issues of adaptation, resilience, food security, and in particular also youth engagement. And if I'm not mistaken, maybe we're going to hear a bit about the youth engagement part of your research on the ground. And as you might have seen in the last slide, Maeva's interest, and we briefly talked about this before starting this session, in the Arctic started in 2009 when during her master she was on board of a Canadian Coast Guard ship going up north. And I suppose the magic of the North has never left you and has also led to your academic career. So we're very curious to hear about your action or your presentation on action, Inuit youth engagement on climate change using participatory video Maeva. So the floor is all yours, and you take it away.
Thank you so much, Oliver, and thank you for having me today. Presenting my research. It's great to be presenting in front of quite a few people that I know already. So in a way, it's more it's more fun. So I am going to try to share my screen. There you go. And please let me know if there's any issues for sound or images. And so, yes, I'm very happy today to be sharing my research on the ground with the youth in Tuktoyaktuk. So I'm going to focus today more on the youth engagement aspect and the participatory video work that I've been doing so far. And there's a lot of people involved in this project, so I'd like to acknowledge that. There's a teacher, Michelle Tomasino from Mangilaluk School. I'm working closely with the Tuktoyaktuk Community Corporation and the youth in Tuktoyaktuk. So the youth participants here, Ariel, Daryl, Carmen, Nathan, and Brian have been very crucial in the project. And Jaro Malanowski from Avatar Media has been the filmmaker I've been working with, and he's done a lot of community filmmaking work. And I'd like to acknowledge, with respect, the Lekwungen peoples whose traditional territory UVic stands, and also Sanghees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. And I'm very grateful to be living, learning, and raising my family on this land. So today, so in terms of timeline in my PhD project, I am almost at the point of my comprehensive exam. So just so you have an idea a little bit about where I'm at. So I've done things a little bit backward in terms of the PhD. Often people do their comprehensive exam and then they do their field work. But in my case, because I had a baby in 2018, it was easier for me to actually do the field work with the baby and then get into the comprehensive exam a little bit later. So for some of you who are aware of the normal timeline, my timeline is a little bit shifted. So I'll talk today a little bit about the background, so Tuktoyaktuk and the context there, my research goals and questions, the conceptual frameworks I'm working within, the methods I'm using and I'm going to use as well, some insights from the field, and also share the trailer of the movie that the youth have been working on and some of the impacts so far. But before jumping into my work, some people might wonder why the Arctic. I think from what I've learned from the community of researchers that I know who work in the Arctic, we all had a love story that started somewhere with the Arctic. So for me, my first time going up north was in 2009, and when my prof, Kim Juniper at UVic, I was doing my master's in marine biology, and he asked me if I wanted to go, study the marine ecosystems up north on the icebreaker Amundsen for 6 weeks, and I said yeah. So I joined the expedition from Politic, Northwest Territories across the Northwest Passage and eastern of Baffin Island, and then the Labrador coast, ending in Quebec City. So that was my first experience with the North, and it was very magical. And we also had Inuit participants on board, but I felt at the same time pretty disconnected from the human reality of the North. And I think that's where my interest from the human side of things really started, because I was like, okay, we're studying all these marine ecosystems, but what about the people who live here? What about their knowledge? What about, how can we bridge those knowledges too between science and traditional knowledge? So that was my my initial interest. And then over the years, I've worked also in coastal mapping in the north of Alaska with the Shore Zone program, and worked with some coastal communities there, Kaktovik and Point Leif in Alaska, for example. And then 2017, I had the opportunity to join the Canada C3 expedition from Cambridge Bay to Kugluktuk. And with the organization, my organization, we do a lot of online education, and we did an Arctic live dive where we explored the underwater world in the Arctic in Cambridge Bay. And here on the photo, in the middle, we can see Mia Otokiak with her grandma, Eva, and they shared with us some of their experiences related to climate change in the north. And so that was 2017. That was when I started actually my PhD. And when I started, I wanted to work in the Arctic, but I was like, okay, where am I gonna work? And I chose Tuktoyaktuk more specifically because my friend Michelle Tomasino, who used to be my neighbor in Victoria, she's a teacher in Tuktoyaktuk. So that was for me a great way into the community. She's been living on and off for 20 years in the region, Tuktoyaktuk and Inuvik. So for me, it was really important to start where I could have already some relationships in the community. So it's easier to work with the community. So in terms of background on the Arctic in general, many of you know that there's a lot of changes happening up north in the Arctic, many environmental changes. And those changes affect culture and their way of life and subsistence foods and livelihoods, because the subsistence foods and livelihoods is very, very central for many of the communities. And it's part of survival and sharing food and culture and health. And so it's very crucial. There's also a long history of adaptation in the north. And so people will say that, yes, people are used to surviving this changing landscape, yes. But at the same time, the pace in the political and social and economical contexts have changed. And so it is also influencing adaptations. And so the question has been asked, is the pace of change surpassing coping capabilities? Some of the issues in the north, for example, plastics and microplastics in particular is becoming emerging contaminants. So microplastics is found in sea ice, and with climate change, it's being released. And with subsistence foods being so important, it's ending up in the community's diets. So this is definitely a concern from communities. Also, climate change is also affecting a lot of their activities and food security. And for example, in the context of Tuktoyaktuk, there are multiple things happening at once. So their permafrost is melting, there's erosion, there's flooding, there's also stronger storms in the summer because there's less sea ice protecting the coastline. And so there's more energy from the waves. It's also changing subsistence patterns, like migration from the animals is changing in terms of location and timing. And so I've heard a few times already that people can't trust their own traditional knowledge. So it's quite scary for some of the people who are really living this. In terms of the peer-reviewed literature on food security in the north, there's been some lacks in terms of community-driven research, and also there's a call for more citizen engagement, especially to look at the connection between human health and ecosystem health and social justice. And in terms of participatory methods out there, there's quite a few that are really good for engaging communities and documenting social and environmental observations of change. So one of them is the photo voice method, which is pretty much like having the community members taking photos of a topic, a particular topic, and then commenting on it either through caption or recording their voices. There's also digital storytelling like videos, and participatory video, which is an approach I'm going to talk more about today, where you are teaching and building capacity for the community members to actually do their own videos. So it's been shown to be a powerful tool for engagement and also building agency, also strengthening resilience and bridging the gap a little bit between the community members and policymakers who are actually involved in putting those laws into place. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more closely about Tuktoyaktuk. So Tuktoyaktuk is located on the Arctic Ocean in the Northwest Territories. It's about 1,000 people in terms of population. And to get there from Victoria, there's different ways. You could drive all the way. It would take you, I think, 56 hours nonstop. My friend Michelle actually has done it. maybe not nonstop though. And there's also different flights. So I like the Air North route where you can go Victoria Whitehorse overnight, and then Whitehorse Inuvik, and then you drive. Now you can drive from Inuvik to Tuktoyaktuk all year long, and that's a 2 hours drive. And so Tuktoyaktuk means place resembling a caribou. The population is 90% Inuit, and Tuk is also, Tuktoyaktuk is often called Tuk, just so you know. So it was a base for oil and gas development in the Beaufort Sea in the 70s and 80s, and that brought a lot of services in town and the road to the resources, and there's been a push for that. And so it's currently the only Canadian Arctic village accessible via all-year road only since November 2017. So that's also bringing changes in the community for sure. The economy is centered around it was a traditional whaling town, and there's a lot of subsistence hunting and fishing, and tourism, transportation, and gas is also important. Although with COVID right now, tourism is affected for sure. My research goal in questions. So the goal of my research is to look at resilience and analyze perceptions related to food security and global environmental change, especially climate change and plastic waste in the community of Tuk. And I kept the start of my project pretty broad because I wanted to take a community-based approach. So I didn't want to tell the youth involved what they were concerned about. I really wanted to take an approach where I wanted to listen to them. The first time I went in 2018 was really like to meet up and listen and get to know them and building relationship. And by talking to them and brainstorming, climate change and plastic waste became clear that it was of concern to them. And so the questions driving my research are, what are the perceptions from the community about global changes, and how do they see this affecting their subsistence foods and activities? What contributions can be made by using participatory digital tools like participatory video to bring about changes in practice, policy, and capacity in northern communities? And what grassroots social innovation tools like community monitoring or participatory mapping for environmental monitoring are useful to engage the community and policymakers? The conceptual frameworks that I'm reading about a lot these days that are driving my research. I want to take a political ecology lens to really explore the relations between political, economic, and social factors within the environmental issues and changes. And so that often helped to explore uneven power dynamics happening that are related to managing nature. The social ecological systems framework that was developed to enable cumulative learning from communities, and community-based research, which is really important. It's really the foundation of my project, and it really allows me and the community and the researchers and the people involved to do co-production of knowledge and to share decisions and ownership over the research being undertaken. The methods that I've been using and that I will use, I'm taking a qualitative approach, which is a big change from my science background, but I really enjoy it. Participatory video. So we've done a film workshop in June 2019, last year. And then we were going to go back early April 2020, but it was postponed. Focus group and photo voice. I'm looking at exploring photo voice, especially because it's photo and caption, or photo and voice recorded for the topic of plastic waste, because moving forward and doing remote engagement in the context of COVID, photo voice is probably one of the easier approach to make it work, because it's participatory video is a little bit more intensive work. So it's hard to do when you're not there physically in person. In-depth interviews. Well, the youth have done a lot of interviews so far. So it's interviews by youth, and they interviewed themselves, they interviewed community leaders, and they also interviewed community members. And of course, informal meetings. There's a lot of meetings, for the different government bodies and Inuvik and Tuktoyaktuk, and also observation. So when we do the film workshop in June 2019, they interviewed 15 people, including some of themselves, but also 3 scientists, educators, 5 community members. We also did the interviews afterwards to document their reflections on the film workshop and what they got out of it, or what would they change. And they interviewed on the topic of climate change and living in 2 worlds. So living in 2 worlds for them is the clash between the modern and traditional worlds, and it's actually driving everything. Even for climate change, the culture aspect is so important to them, the cultural impact of climate change. So living in 2 worlds really explore more the cultural side of things. And so that was after an interview with Randall Polkiak, which unfortunately passed away this summer. So it was pretty sad, but at the same time, I was glad we were able to, or they were able to interview him last summer. So we had about 5 to 7 participants from grade 6 to 9, and I say 5 to 7, and people ask me sometimes, like, is it 5? Is it 7? It's the reality of the North and of communities, in some communities where participants are not necessarily there every day, every morning, all the time. So we've, especially in June, it's like daylight all the time. So we had a lot of people or students who were going to bed 5 a.m. and then they would show up maybe at 9 a.m. if we were lucky, but if not, later in the day. And some came every day and they were super interested, and some showed up a few times. And so we wanted to still acknowledge their participation, but definitely some were more involved than others. And it's part of the reality. So we did sometimes workshops in the morning, and then we would meet again after school, and there would be more participants often after 4 p.m. So we'd do interviews in the evening, and the light was really beautiful as the later you would get. So in a way, it was good for filming. So that picture on the left side is filming at midnight on the beach. So the Pingo we see in the background, that little hill, Pingo is very particular of that region, and Pingo is like it's pushed by it's the permafrost pushing through, and it makes this little hill. So that's a very special feature, and it's actually part of a national park in the region, the Pingo National Landmark. So we filmed on the beach there. They were filming some of the erosion that we can see. And some of the comments we got from some teachers at the school, there were some teachers saying, there was a participant, Daryl, 15 years old, and they were saying they've never seen him so motivated, because he was showing up every morning and he was there all day, like all throughout the day until we were finished. And he was there for 2.5 weeks every day. So they've never seen him so motivated. And he was also pretty confident, like he would show other kids how to use the camera, and so you would show them once and then they would show it to others right away. So they were really hands-on. Ariel here on the left side is typically really shy, and people were like, they were saying that she really came out of her shell, and she was interviewing people and smiling a lot. So it was great to hear that kind of feedback. Some of the things they documented was around the land changing because of climate change, and the subsistence activities also that are changing. So for example, this house, it's Noella Cockney's house, that was filmed in June 2019 on the left side. And 2 months later, that's a photo of her house. So you can see sometimes just 2 or 3 storms in the summer can take meters of coast. And actually, she had to move her house this spring, and so it's very, very, very real, and it's really a matter of survival for the community there. And I think that really speaks strongly in the film that they've made. Erosion, permafrost melting, route changes, especially for hunting, sea ice safety and the duration of the sea ice. Those are all themes that documented in their film. Also, it's hard to predict the weather. The patterns are changing. Hard to trust their own traditional knowledge. And there's a lot around the migrations changing also for the animals. So that's a photo of Noela's house now. So Michelle sent me that picture I think it was March or April. So that red house on the left side there. And so now it's at Reindeer Point, which is maybe 15 minutes from Tuk. It's more inland. So Reindeer Point is like the suburb of Tuk. And so that's where they're mostly moving the houses to. So they moved 4 houses last spring. There's other issues in town that the youth want to talk about, and we haven't really yet touched the plastic topic, but this is coming up probably in the fall. I'm working closely with the teacher, Michelle, to look at that. So waste governance and management issues. There's an open dump in town. So as soon as you drive in, this is like the first thing you see. There's a big dump, open dump on the side of the street, and it's connected to, there's a bit of water, it's connected to the ocean not too far, and things are flying away. Tuk is very windy. And so there's basic recycling in town, but it's very limited, and it's a problem. I mean, across the north, I've heard that a lot, that waste management is a big issue, and there's a lot of things that are shipped north for groceries, and then they're not coming back south in terms of the waste. So it's a big one-way thing, and like, how can we make that full circle? How can we integrate more recycling? There is some, but it's still very limited. So in terms of the participatory video approach, so they've been really through the process of like brainstorming the storyline, creating their questions that they wanted to ask their interviews, and they did the editing, and we helped in terms of editing for polishing, but really like it was really driven by them. And so I found through that process that the engagement is very increased in terms of their own leadership and their confidence. Also, they're really part of a co-production project. They're all working on this together and with me, and it's also increasing dialogue about the topic that they chose. So because they chose climate change, they talked about the issue together, they interviewed people about it, they learned through that process. So it's an awareness for them, but also for the community, and also beyond that. So that's just through that process, it's an interesting process for that in terms of learning that comes with it, and awareness. And I didn't plan it this way, but when we did the film workshop last June 2019, there was a release of the National Inuit Climate Change Strategy. And so there was this big delegation of ministries and like president of this and that coming to town. So I think there was 18 people coming into town. So there was a big thing, and I was really working hard so the youth could meet with them, because it's a good timing. So I was told, okay, like 5 minutes, Catherine McKenna can meet 5 minutes with the kids. Like, great, perfect. So she met all the people at the hamlet, which is like the city in Tuk, and then she arrived to Carmen and Ariel here on that picture, and she just like glued onto them, and like she asked them tons of questions, and then they interviewed her outside, and that was a really great experience. Catherine McKenna had really good questions for them, and I think they felt like they were that she was really listening to them, and that was a great experience for all involved. And Nathan Obed, which is amazing too, he's a president of Inuit Taparit Kanatami, which is an Inuit organization in Ottawa that represents all Inuit in Canada, and he also spoke to them, and he is very authentic, and his voice is so powerful, and so he's in the film as well. And spending 6 weeks traveling there with my family was also quite the experience. So that was the way to make it work for me. But also I wanted to have the experience for the family. You know, it's like, it's tough sometimes to be the only one passionate about the Arctic in my family, and then they don't really get why. So I really wanted to make it work. So Sasha was 7 months old, and Matisse was 5. And Mathis was going to the school, the preschool in Tuktoyaktuk. I think he was the only little blonde guy with blue eyes. And Sasha was mostly at home. And so that was quite the experience. And we arrived there and the sea ice was covering the ocean. It was beautiful. And it was the end of May. And then slowly we saw things kind of melting away and like breaking out. And the ice disappeared like in one night at some point, just disappeared. And that was they said it was 2 weeks early that year. So it was earlier than usual. And I met Kate Snow in Inuvik. So it's funny how the Arctic world is very small. It's a big space, but very small at the same time. So Kate Snow I've met at a conference, I think in 2010 or 2011. And she was the daughter of my boss at that time. And we kept in touch. And now she works with fisheries and oceans in Inuvik. And when I was going through town, she's like, come on over, I'll make you muskox stew. And so I tasted muskox stew, and she's really, really awesome. And Sasha here is with her little atikluk. It's like a typical clothing that people wear in Tuk. So it's called atikluk. And that's Daryl here at Sasha. Actually, I will always remember he offered to babysit one night and came back at 1 a.m. because it's like daylight at 1 a.m. So anyway, came back at 1 a.m. in the house and he had the two kids completely awake in the living room. Sasha was in his arms and Mathis was running around the living room. So it was pretty funny to see that. And it's really normal for the North. I was like, oh my God. Yeah. So film screening. So the photo here on the top right was during the film screening at the end of the film workshop. So 2.5 weeks. And for those who've worked on films before, it's very stressful to do the edit on time to do a showing. I think Yarrow didn't sleep the night before. It was just editing. And then the film would not export. So we had to show it directly from the editing software platform, but it worked out. So the 70 people came to the film showing. We had some food. And everybody was really proud of the youth. And the youth were also very, they felt really proud of themselves too with what they accomplished. And it was a great moment. So it was pretty emotional too. Like it's an important topic for people in town. And we want to expand on the film, but the topic of relocation came up after the film screening. And so we're pretty sure we're going to include the relocation topic in the film for the next version as well, because it's such an important part of their future. And as we were going through that process of film workshop, often we were finishing the shoots with 1, 2, 3, Tuk TV, and we were all like joining hands. And so Tuk TV kind of became a thing, and now Tuk TV is the youth in town, and they can do film projects either with the school or with the community. So they have some film gear they can use in the community and some iMac to do some editing. So so it's possible to keep going. Now I'm going to show a trailer. So there's like a 3-minute film trailer, and let me know if there's any issues, but we did a test beforehand.
Have you noticed any changes?
Well, there's been a lot of changes. We get late freeze up in the fall, like we used to travel, start driving dogs over the ice in the middle of September. In October, we used to build igloos.
Every year it's different. Like it can get warm, or it can get very cold. The water sea level has risen a little bit ever since I was 13. Like I looked at the ocean sometimes when I was 13, 14, 15 to 19. Water level has been getting higher and higher.
Well, I've noticed that there's less beach to walk on, and there's a lot of permafrost melting. You can see here, there's a lot of erosion happening.
At that time, the shoreline was way out and I had no problem driving the vehicle over behind my house. But now, in 2015, 3 storms took most of it, put close to about 20 feet off of it. And it's just been getting worse and worse ever since.
Those are things that I go to bed worrying about, whether or not there are going to be char in 40 or 50 years in Univ, or what's going to happen to our carbon. And these are all linked to climate change. And so that's what really drives me to work on behalf of this issue.
I just think that kids should be very aware of climate change, and I think that we should all take it serious because we are the next generation and we could make a change in the world. People may doubt us, but it's what we have the power to do anything. Like what my dad said, he always said, have determination and effort, and nothing will be impossible. So yeah, just be aware and prepared.
I like your words, Ariel.
Thank you.
So after working on this film, so they came up with a 22-minute film, and I couldn't show the whole thing because of the time we have today, but 6 months later, or less than 6 months later, I guess, but we got the invitation from the Inuit Circumpolar Council delegation to join their delegation to go to the UN Climate Change Conference, COP25 in Madrid, in Spain last December. So that was really exciting. And so we did some fundraising for that, and it worked out. So we had 4 youth from TAC going to Madrid to show their film multiple times. And that was really an amazing experience for everybody involved. And they got to meet other communities really affected by climate change. And they interviewed people, they got interviewed. So it was very intense. And yeah, a great experience all around. And they got to meet some ambassadors as well, like ambassadors are negotiating for climate change for Canada, like Patricia Fuller, and also the ambassador of Canada in Spain. So that was quite the experience as well, to go through all the security and go to the embassy. And so it was a great experience. So in their words, I added some quotes about their experience. And so I'll just give you some time to read here. So that was Ariel Lute, and Carmen Kuptana also shared some of her experience. So following that, There's been lots of, media attention. The youth have been, Ariel and Daryl, we see here on the picture, were at CBC Vancouver for a radio podcast interview when they came to the Adaptation 2020 conference. That was last February. So they were really excited to visit the studio. And a recent event was a virtual conference, actually. And we did the film screening. It was for an annual gathering on health, climate change, and youth. And it was mostly focused on Northwest Territories. There were researchers working in the Northwest Territories, but also there were people who are community members. So it was a nice gathering to exchange information. So there was a film screening and then a Q&A afterwards. And so it was a great experience to, it was kind of different to do a film screening online too, because people could comment right away after. So I took some screenshots of the comments, and it was kind of fun to have like really direct feedback right away. And there was an artist, Alison McCreesh, who did graphic recording, and this is what she captured from the Q&A. So that was kind of really interesting to see what they got out of it. So yes, and I do believe that, the film has an impact because it speaks from the heart to the heart. And it's different from science, where you see data and graphs and changes, yes, but versus like the personalization of the impacts, that people are affected personally, their survival is affected, their culture, their way of life is affected. So I think the combination of all those perspectives can really help with driving the issue forward in terms of awareness and change. So in terms of what's next, right now we're trying to do remote engagement. It's not very easy. I'm glad that I have a good relationship with Michelle, the teacher there. And so we've been talking about her class. She's teaching a leadership class this semester. She has about 8 students. And so she thinks she can engage them around plastics and photo voice. So we're gonna probably work towards that. And I'm getting ready for my comprehensive exam. So lots of reading. If you have any reading suggestions, please let me know. And we're hoping to go back next, when it's time to, when we can travel again, but do a phase 2 film workshop where we can explore more the solutions around climate change, their perceptions or what their solutions that they have. And also there've been some talks about youth to youth exchanges. So we want to explore more of that, because they're becoming a bit of a pilot project where people in other communities in the Arctic, they're like, how can we do this here? How can we do maybe youth to youth exchange, mentorship and all that? So we've been exploring some of that. There's a lot of partners and people behind this. So it's a very amazing to see all the support that we've had for this project. And do you have any questions? So I think we still have some time for questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Maeva. I'm kind of ready to see here, this is, I think, fun. Elizabeth's, very inspiring story. You surely took community engaged research, to a whole new level here with your projects, and being able even to take them to Madrid to the COP meeting, wonderful story. Who would like to start us off with questions, suggestions? Let me just go to our chat here. Oh, Sarah is here. Do you want to, or let me see, first it's Kelly, and then I think Elizabeth doesn't have one. So let's start with Kelly and then Sarah. Kelly, you're first.
Oh, hi, thanks. My vet just arrived and I have to leave for my dog to get vaccinated. So my timing's really bad. But Maeva, thank you so much. I'm so interested in your work. And my question is actually around the ethics piece. And maybe it's just a conversation I could follow up with you later, because I see multiple organizations involved, including you, Vic, because this is your dissertation research, or part of it is. There's youth, which is another layer, maybe ITK, or there's Inuit ethics or protocols that come into place. And I just would really love to know how that has maybe shaped or been a part of your work, and if you've faced issues or concerns, or if it's all done smoothly. One of the reasons I'm interested is because I'm working on ethical guidance for knowledge co-production, which is a term that you used. And so, yeah, just really love to learn about your experience. And I'm speaking with a group doing participatory video in Alberta with a Blackfoot elder. And we're just talking through some of the issues that are coming up for them in their second year of work. Like some of it is around like approaching elders or about really respecting, doing the editing and respecting what someone decides they don't want to have on record, or who owns the work, and all of so many questions, but that's probably too big to kind of answer here, and I'd love to follow up with you after.
I can touch on a few things briefly, but yeah, of course, with community-based research, the tricky part sometimes is to do the ethical application before you actually get to work with the community. So talking to my supervisor, Jutta Goodbarlet, and Crystal Tremblay, who's on my committee as well, and they've done a lot of community-based research. We were looking at keeping my, my research topic very broad at first. So for my first ethics application with UVic. And so once I had the community input, then I was able to kind of tweak my ethics application a little bit more for the following year. And then there's also the Northwest Territories research license process, and that incorporates all the feedback from all the different levels involved in, say, the Hamlet in Tuktoyaktuk, the Tuktoyaktuk Community Corporation. You know, you have to kind of go through all the levels. So yeah, it's kind of months of preparation, and then it's relationship and communications, and it's not always easy with work that is remote for me. So it's like you deal with different perceptions in the community, and some people are like, you know, they might have misperceptions or but we've tried to be as much as we can on top of it. So like when the youth interviewed people, we always had release and things like that, so people know that it's going to be made public. But also, if there's anything they don't want to be included in the film, we would take it off, right? So so it's sensitive topics and things like that. So but yeah, I'm happy to connect again to discuss more in detail.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll be in touch. I'll email you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Bye.
Thanks, Kelly. Sarah, first of all, welcome back to UVic. I haven't been able to congratulate you. Are you in town? Can you hear me? I think you're muted at the moment. Stephanie, could you unmute Sarah? I don't have this kind of power.
I also don't have the power to unmute. I can request that she unmute.
Oh,
can anybody hear me? No.
Yeah.
You can hear me. This is a bit strange because I can't hear anybody else all of a sudden. So I'm not sure what happened here with my connection. I apologize. It's very strange. I'll try to figure it out. And so that feels like a weird form of engagement. If you can hear me and I can't hear you anymore. But I wanted to say thank you so much for your great presentation. And we haven't met before, but my name is Sarah Weave, and I'm actually going to be an incoming faculty in the School of Public Administration at UVic starting in January. So I'm really excited to be returning, and hopefully we can have further conversations about yeah, your great work. And I was just curious if you wanted to share a little bit about doing this kind of field research. You mentioned, you know, you had just had a child and you took your child to the community and what that experience was like for you, and then also what it's like now in the time of COVID as you're, you know, trying to maintain relationships and maybe having to think carefully about returning, what that looks like. So hopefully I'll figure out my sound settings so I can hear your answer, because I'm really curious to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely field work. I tried to, so my first field work there, I was 8 months pregnant, so traveling there. Can you still hear us? I'm not sure if you can hear us. You can hear? Can you hear us, Sarah? Yeah, okay. But
I think my headphones died. I think that's what it was. So I can hear you now.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess the first time was 10 days that I went, and I didn't go with the family at that point because it was a little easier and logistically. And then with the family, I thought it would be easier to stay longer. So there's not so much, it's such a big trek to go there with the family and all this stuff you need to bring, like a stroller and all those logistical things, and when you have a baby. So, but once you're there and settled, like we rented a house, and so it was fairly stable, right? And then we had access to we could borrow a car and all that. So I think it's easier in a way if you go longer and you have more time to kind of just stay put and have time to meet people and no pressure around the project too much. Like just like, okay, this is what we're gonna do in 2 weeks, and yeah, how can, just kind of getting the project ready in a way, but making sure everybody's on the same page. And it was yeah, it was tough in terms of daylight, 24 hours daylight, because the kids, my son was like, why would I go to bed? All the kids are playing outside at 10 p.m. Like, it was just a different reality, right? So sometimes it was really hard to put him to bed. But otherwise it was kind of fun. Like I find that it was nice to bring the family and so they can experience it, but also for the community, it was, I think, nice for them to see that I also have a family like they have, and like the kids can play together. And so there's pros and cons, because it's harder to have like a non-stop conversation if the kids are around. But if you have some support, or either another person helping out, or the school or a daycare too, that can help. Yeah, so definitely. And then the COVID thing, it's been hard to kind of keep going on the engagement side. Just hard when you're not there. We're really lucky to have Michelle, who's a teacher, and she knows the kids. She can text them. It's very. But some of them are graduated now. So one of them moved out of TAC already. And so it's like, okay, so we have to kind of re-engage some new youth as well. But I think as long as we work within the school system, it's a little bit easier to engage them, because they will go to school. Normally they would go and they go in the class, and Michelle can kind of work within, work the project within her classroom setting. So like, oh yeah, we work on leadership, so we're gonna have them write letters to the policymakers in town, right? So it can be linked to my research, but at the same time in our classroom. So I think that's so far what I've found is how we can move forward, because otherwise it's really, really hard to engage, even if they're super motivated and interested in the filmmaking side of things and the topic. When you're not there and there's like not a proper film workshop for 2 weeks, like it's a little harder to kind of get their attention, right? There's always something to do, of course, and they love to go on the land, so it's hard to compete with that. Yeah, maybe we have to just push them, like, bring a camera when you go on the land, but it's not always easy. Yeah, so we're hoping, to do more photo voice, which is a little more simple to do with remote engagement, and then hopefully more video work when we can travel again. Yeah. But I'd be happy to connect.
By the way, before I hand over to Nicole, Sarah, do you want to briefly introduce yourself to the current cohort of CFGS fellows and affiliates? You share the passion for community engaged work. So.
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. It's so nice to see so many of you, some familiar faces and new faces and names. Yeah, I actually did my bachelor's and master's at the University of Victoria, and then a postdoc position after my PhD at the University of Ottawa, which I finished in 2013. And then I was away at the University of Hawaii from 2017 until now. And right now I'm in Victoria, teaching remotely and online until the end of the year. And then I will be starting in the School of Public Administration in January. And my areas of research focus on political ecology, environmental justice, and community engaged research. And so I've also done some mixed media storytelling, and similarly wonder how best to kind of maintain relationships during COVID and from afar. So hopefully, we'll have many opportunities to chat further.
Well, we have to talk.
Well, wonderful to see you back at UVic, Sarah, and please keep the center in mind when you're back on campus. Hopefully we have our doors open by then as well. Nicole.
Sounds great.
Great. Thanks, Maeva. This was amazing. It's so good to hear you talk about your work because you're always so passionate, but also I really appreciate you bringing in kind of your personal story to while you share your research, because as we know, everybody has a life going on in addition to their research. Probably this will come as no surprise, but I'm curious about the relocation of the housing from Tuk to Reindeer Point. And I guess maybe I'm interested in kind of, I guess maybe what would be most interesting for me, and I don't know if you can talk about it, but the kind of process of decision making or of the community or of the individual, or kind of where the decision making was in terms of scale or kind of agency, and if you know about how that played out, both in terms of the decision to move and then also the location of to where.
Yeah, so I'm not really familiar with the topic, but I am gonna be, because we are we're looking at applying for a grant for there's an Environment Canada grant right now for community engagement and climate change, and we're applying as a group. And there's a professor from, I think it's from Laurier University, and he's worked a lot on relocation, climate change, and communities. And there's also partners in the community. The Hamlet is the one, so the city, but it's called the Hamlet, and Tuk is the one that's mostly involved with the relocation because they deal with land. And there are some plans, and I think they know they have to move forward, but right now what we want to do is engage the community around that process. So like, because it's such an emotional topic and some people don't want to move, but they will have eventually to move the town. Like, it's just a matter of time. So maybe in 20 years, maybe in 25 years, they will have to have a school, and all the facilities and services they need, probably at Reindeer Point. I think that's where it's it's the best location, because it's kind of stable and it's 20 minutes, 15 minutes inland from Tuk. So, but yeah, so I think they're really starting in that process. So I'm gonna know more a little bit further, but I think they want to mainly, they have lots of reports and this and that, and they want to, bring all the information together and make it digestible for the community to really understand what's going on and what are the plans, and have their input about the plan as well. Yeah.
So thus far, it's been on an individual basis because that one house was so precariously positioned on that point. Right?
Yeah,
okay.
There's like 4. They moved 4 last spring.
4. Okay.
And so it's very much on a personal basis so far. It's like, and it's not that they want to move, but they have to at some point. So, and mostly at the point in Tuk, it's very, very precarious there. Yeah. And when we talked to Dustin Whalen for the film, when we did the film, like he was talking that actually he's never seen that. He's like specialist in coastal erosion from Dalhousie and from natural resources actually, but he was saying that he's never seen that. It's pure ice under Tuk. So with the test that they've done and the scientific tests and all that, they found that it's pure ice. So it melts faster than permafrost. So there's a mix of like permafrost and pure ice. So so it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So how do you engage people so everybody's on board, right? But it's tough. It's a tough topic. So
yeah, it's a person. Sorry, I won't ask anything more after this. Is it Brent Oberstein?
The one for where?
At Laurier? No, it's okay.
No, it's Dustin Whalen that we've been working.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yay. You're welcome.
So, Juan Francisco, you're next.
Great. This is really amazing. I really miss doing field work. I haven't been doing field work for a long time, so I really miss it. So I wanted to ask you a couple of things. So I'm really interested at processes of kind of like institutional change, where actors are engaging with efforts to change institutions that, I don't know, for example, related to climate change or how some industries operate. But I like to look, I'm curious about the kind of like self-work of these actors trying to change institutions. So I was wondering, how do the narratives of like notions of self or identity from these communities have changed as they have started to engage in these global arenas where kind of like global issues are being discussed, and kind of like meeting with politicians and policymakers, like whether their notion of self or their identity as a community have changed or evolved in times to kind of like participate in these different settings.
It's hard to say at this point. I mean, I haven't analyzed all the interviews yet, and I think we're still early in the project, but I can go from what I've heard from them when they were interviewed, for example, by CBC, and I've with the participants that have been involved, like Carmen, who's been to COP25 as well, and she said that she's not afraid to say what she wants to say anymore. So that's one thing, and so the leadership, really building the leadership and their sense of confidence, and also like being proud of their community. And like, I am from Tuktoyaktuk, and this is what we're experiencing, and also kind of feeling that they're not alone in this, because when they were at COP25, they were like able to see that there were indigenous communities from all around the world being displaced or being really affected on the survival mode, like on the survivals, like because of droughts or because of losing their land. So that sense of like, you know, we're not alone and we can speak up, and other people also want to change things. We're not alone in this. So that's what I've noticed so far from observations. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Thanks. Angie, you're next.
Hi, Maeva. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. I've done some work on Chinese documentary films, so I saw so many connections with independent filmmaking happening today in China. But I was curious about this project, and in terms of like audience and circulation, how did you decide, you know, the final length of the film? And is there some sense of like what kind of viewers you would have beyond, you know, I saw the photo from the screening in the community center, and you said that the filmmakers were able to travel to the climate change conference. Kind of beyond that, what are some other possible kind of venues or audiences that you've imagined for the project? Thank you.
Yeah, so it's tough. I mean, at this point we have a 22-minute film, but it's not the final film, so it's not public yet, but we've been doing private screenings, of course, so like in the community Tuktoyaktuk and also Inuit close by, and also like conferences like Adaptation 2020 and Health and Climate Change and COP25. So of course we've been sharing it, but not like super broadly, mainly because we want to expand on it and include more solutions around the issue, and also give it a chance to access film festivals. And so I'm not as aware of this whole realm, like, but I'm working closely with a filmmaker, and he's really aware of all this process, and he's like, you know, we can make it public because otherwise it won't be accepted in film festivals. So if we want to give it a chance, we have to kind of wait a little longer. So because of that, the timeline, you know, it's going to be a little longer, but I think it has the potential to reach like a very global audience. I've shown it in some classes at UVic, and I think it has the potential for people in the South to really connect on a personal level with the issue of climate change, because often it feels really disconnected from us. You know, it's happening, but you don't really see it like behind your house. Like, and then when you hear youth talking about, you know, this is happening, I'm gonna have to move my house. This is really, it's because the video is it's made by youth, and they did an amazing job. It's very authentic voice. It's very, so it just really speaks to the heart, I think. So I think an audience of like a global audience of people who are not experiencing climate change at such a personal level is where I would love to see the film go, because it's where we have more chances of bringing awareness. And policymakers too, like I think, well, we've had different levels of policymakers watching the film. It's really hard to see the impact though, because you don't know how long this is going to take for or like, okay, yeah, they might be touched by it, but is it gonna transform into like a change in the laws? Or it's hard to see where this full circle, you know, goes.
I mean, I think it's great to see young people making movies beyond TikTok videos. So that spurs me. I feel better seeing that. But at the same time, there's so many awesome documentary films that people just like don't want to watch, right? Because they're like too serious or they're too depressing. So I think it's very hard to hit that like middle spot. But yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes. So it's wonderful. Thank you.
And let me just underline Adrian's point here. I'm coming out of adjudicating Marie Curie fellowships, and the applicants always ask, what is the impact? What ways of dissemination your knowledge will you use? And if you see what kind of impact your movie already has had, right, in terms of reaching different audiences. And I think it's humbling for us as academics sometimes to imagine our peer-reviewed journal articles, right, but how little, in a way, impact it has, in particular when it comes to non-academic audiences. And so how powerful, what a powerful tool this is. It opens doors, it connects you, you can tell a story in very different ways, right? But I think often us as academics, we're not very well equipped to exploit this opportunity to use different kind of media to play around with this. And so I think, what you have done is really exemplary in terms of engaging the community and producing something that resonates with different audiences. I think that's a tall order, and having done some of the videos myself through other projects, I know how much work goes into this, right? And how labor intensive they are in terms of resources, time, and all of that. Maeva, can I ask you another question? I'm wondering, for you coming into a relatively remote community, how were you perceived? I understand, going over there with your family, you build trust and over time, but at the same time, what you often also hear is there's some reservation about being subject of research, right? Someone comes in, and use you as an object of a particular interest. And then even the university can sometimes be perceived to be kind of a state institution that comes with control, with power. I'm just wondering, how do you deal, have you encountered this kind of pushback, against a scientist that you are? And, how do you deal with this kind of suspicion of just being used, for a particular interest, or even under, some kind of suspicion of surveillance by state authority?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Like, you always have the outsider syndrome in a way. And I think it's always there, and that history is always there. So what you have to do is to, in a way, build a relationship, and eventually people get to know you, and they like, okay, yeah, like we really been trying to push the youth forward, and it's their film, and they came up with the story and they filmed, and we're just kind of there to mentor, and it's more of a facilitator role. And so it's yeah, but yeah, definitely there's been some comments sometimes, and it's just trying to listen and just keep going, and you can only build trust with time, and sometimes actions speak more than words. So it's like, okay, I understand that some people might not trust us. We're not from here, but I know Michelle for 10 years, but it's okay. Like, we're gonna work with the youth, and we're gonna do this together. And it's just trying to move forward, and things. I mean, there's gonna be some people who might have a mistrust, but then I think the majority in the community have been like very proud of the youth and very happy about the project, and it's been kind of creating a ripple effect. Like Inuit has heard of it, and then like other Arctic communities, they want to work with the youth. So it's it's just kind of keep it going, and just kind of communicating on a regular basis, which is not always easy to do with working with remote communities. I think Ken had...
Yeah, right. I was about to say, sorry, Ken, I jumped the queue there. Ken, if you could come in.
Great, thanks very much. And thanks, Maeva, for a wonderful presentation, great research. I had a couple of questions. One, I know suicide is a huge issue in terms of Inuit youth. And I was wondering how that might have come up during the project, whether climate change, sort of a hopelessness or helplessness connected to that might feed into it, whether your project empowering youth to kind of come to grips with the issue and whether that's maybe helpful in terms of mental health around this issue. So that's kind of one set of questions. And then I know we spoke about this a while back, but have you managed to engage the Arctic Council in any way in your work? Mm-hmm. Thanks.
So in terms of, yeah, suicide is definitely a big issue in the North in general. The topic didn't come up when we did the brainstorm with the youth, but they talked about drugs, that they were worried about the drugs coming into the community because of the road being there all year long. And I know suicide is an issue, but that didn't come up in the interviews and things like that. In a way, by doing a film workshop, I was hoping that it's gonna give some of the youth there an activity that they love, a new passion, new skills, you know, building confidence. I feel like this project in a way kind of maybe helped a little bit on that side, but you know, you never know really. But some of the kids said, you know, oh, it gives us something to do. You know, they felt like they had a role, they were good at it and they could show other kids. And so I feel like, yeah, the topic didn't come up, but I'm sure, I mean, if we wanted to, we could, but I didn't feel equipped to really get too deep in that topic because this is not my background. And so, but if it came up, I'm sure we could explore the topic more, but we would need to have the proper support also to do that in terms of psychological support and all that. And the Arctic Council, not directly. So with the Inuit Circumpolar Council, we have a good relationship with Joanna mostly, and she worked a lot on the climate change topic. So, and I think the ICC, Inuit Circumpolar Council, has a seat on the Arctic Council, right? But we haven't worked, I think I'm not sure when their next meeting is, but it would be kind of nice to kind of work towards having a youth presence there. I think they meet every 2 years, is it? Or
yeah, but maybe we can talk offline about how to connect with them.
It's nice to kind of access that level for sure, because I'm sure some of the big decisions are made at that level as well. Right? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, I hope I haven't overlooked anyone who would like to discuss a point or bring up a question. Ted, please. Sorry, Ted, I'm not sure. It's monitoring two screens here. It's jumping from one to the other.
No problem, Oliver. As always, you're doing an excellent job. Thanks very much. Maeva, thanks very much for that. Great to see kind of upfront and personal hands-on experience up in the north. And I think as you were saying at the outset, you know, we've kind of been exposed to environmental impacts, but certainly not as much at the community level or individual impacts happening up in our Arctic. I was fortunate enough to be in COP21, not as a formal delegate, but just as a participant. Certainly didn't see, from my perspective there, didn't see a lot of exposure at the venues, different venues, on the impacts in the Arctic or the Antarctic. So it sounds like maybe there's a bit of a trend and maybe more exposure to delegates at COP25 and hopefully future COPs to the kind of impacts that are happening on our polar regions. Question for you around I guess around food security. A couple of parts. One is that you talked about the migratory animals and taking different routes, different times of the year, and that. Can you speak at all to the impacts on the traditional hunting patterns in terms of following the migratory animals? And what impacts it may be having on them? I know I heard one story where there's where the some of the traditional trails are. Some of the hunters are following actually through the ice now because of the precariousness of some of the ice thickness and ice flows up there. But you're now talking about the moving off of traditional paths, if you will, to kind of follow the migratory patterns and the animals in a different way. Can you speak at all to that?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I guess similar to what you said, what we've heard was their roots are changing. So, and also like if you think of permafrost, it's almost like it's very rough in texture. So it makes traveling on the permafrost really difficult when things like melt and like shift and creating like little lake pools, you know, puddles a bit everywhere. So they travel, I guess it's easier for them in the winter with ski-doos, but in the summer with quads, it's very, very rough. It's very hard. In terms of sea ice safety, it's a big issue. So especially shoulder seasons. So when the ice is forming or when the ice is starting to melt, it's like, when is it still safe and things, yeah, so that's another one. And I guess for them, the storms would be a big one as well. Like I've heard a few times that the winds, the wind direction has been changing. And so that's another thing that I've heard. But yeah, I think it's impacting them in terms of maybe like maybe the gas that they use to be able to go hunting, or their safety, of course, and also like, you know, finding where the animals are. So for caribou, for geese, I heard the geese are not going at the same timing or the same place. And caribou patterns are changing as well. And there's different reasons too, like the new road, the all-year road has been changing that, but also I was told some hunters actually use, in a way for them it's more accessible sometimes to see the caribou from the road. So so there's probably like pros and cons around the route. So that's some of the things that I've heard. So yeah, migration, safety, and it's hard for them to adapt because like there's no regular patterns, right? So the patterns are all over the place. So it might be through 1 year, and then the year after the timing will be again different for the geese. So yeah, it's definitely a challenging times for sure.
I'd like to just follow that up quick on another kind of food security slice. And sorry, I can't take my my video, turn my video on here. So presumably, I think you kind of inferred it, if not were explicit about it, about food coming up from the south. So they're actually having to import foods from, I won't necessarily say thrifties or save on foods or the like, but having to import foods because of the lack of success and access to wildlife up there. So A, is that true? And B, presumably that obviously has implications on increased plastics and the plastics going in the dump. And the dump, wondering at what level the present dump is above the present sea level, given the flat terrain that we saw there. And to what extent that could become a precarious problem going forward as sea level rises.
Yeah.
So a number of issues in there.
No, yes, I guess the ship, what I've observed is that it's very complementary. So the grocery food, the store-bought food is very much complementary to their diet. So maybe 50% of their diet comes from subsistence food, so hunting and fishing and all that. And beluga is an important staple there. And store-bought, you might find their produce and some other meats and some, you know, some other things that they cannot find on the land, of course. So it's a bit of a mix. And I guess what they've observed is in terms of plastics, yeah, it's just the plastic ends up in the open dump, and then there's a lot of wind, and plastic ends up in the environment, and then the animals eat it. So yeah, there is definitely some impacts around the wildlife and plastics in the environment there.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to raise a last question, maybe? If not, you know, I echo what Megan left in here. Thank you for the inspiring presentation, Maeva. Best of luck for your comprehensive exam. I'm sure you won't need it, but that's next on your list, and then on to finalizing your PhD and writing, your thesis. So I'm sure we will come back to you and draw on your expertise on community engaged research. So very well done, and we definitely stay tuned to hear about the final results of your project.